A millionaire followed his maid after work. What he discovered changed everything. "Emma, wait." James Harrington's voice cut through the evening air as he watched his housekeeper hurry down the mansion's front steps, shopping bags in both hands. She turned back, her blonde hair catching the porch light. "Yes, Mr. Harrington. Did I forget something?" He studied her face, searching for signs of guilt. "Those bags. What's in them?" Emma's grip tightened on the handles. "Just some groceries I picked up during lunch. Is there a problem? You've been leaving early a lot lately. Family emergencies. You said..." "My mother is sick. I've told you this." James stepped closer. "And you need more money. I heard you on the phone yesterday." Emma's cheeks flushed. "I don't understand what you're asking me." "I'm telling you. I know something's going on." For a moment, they stood in tense silence. Emma adjusted her bags and lifted her chin. "If you don't trust me, Mr. Harrington, perhaps you should find someone else to clean your house." She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing on the pavement. James watched her disappear around the corner. His jaw clenched. Back inside his sterile mansion, James poured himself a scotch and stared out at the London skyline. The house felt like a fortress, which was exactly how he'd designed it after learning that money made everyone a potential enemy. His phone buzzed. David Chen, his assistant and only real friend. "Any luck with the background check on Emma?" James asked without greeting. "Clean as a whistle. But James, you're being paranoid again. She's worked for you for 8 months without incident. Remember Jennifer? Clean background. 2. Still walked away with my grandmother's jewelry. That was 3 housekeepers ago and 2 girlfriends ago. You can't live like this forever." James ended the call and walked to his home office. Security monitors showed empty hallways and pristine rooms. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. Everything lonely. He opened his laptop and pulled up Emma's employment file. Emma Thompson, 29. References checked. Social Security verified. But there were gaps. Evening activities unaccounted for. That phone call yesterday in rapid Spanish, where he'd caught the words, "más dinero," more money. Then there was the receipt he'd found in her jacket pocket when he'd offered to hang it up. £500 wired to Honduras. When he'd asked about it, she'd stammered something about family and quickly changed the subject. James pulled up his security footage from the past week. There was Emma, arriving at 8, working efficiently through his house. But at lunch, she'd spent 20 minutes browsing expensive jewelry websites on her phone. Diamond earrings, tennis bracelets, things that cost more than he paid her in 6 months. The pieces formed a familiar pattern. They always started small, arriving late, leaving early, mysterious phone calls. Then came the bigger moves, missing items, forged checks, empty bank accounts. His phone buzzed with a text. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Emma." James set down his glass. Working late where? Doing what? He'd given her the evening off. He grabbed his keys and headed for the garage. His black Mercedes would blend into London traffic perfectly. Emma took the bus. He'd followed that routine before to ensure she got home safely. But tonight, he'd find out where she really went after work. The evening was crisp, and James felt his heart rate increase as he drove toward Emma's usual bus stop. He told himself this was about protecting his assets, about learning from past mistakes, about being smart instead of naive. But as he spotted Emma's blonde braid boarding the 47 bus, shopping bag still in her hands, James wondered if he was about to uncover another betrayal, or if he was finally losing his mind to paranoia. Either way, tonight, he'd know the truth. James kept 3 cars back as the bus wound through London's evening traffic. His hands gripped the steering wheel, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. Every red light felt like an eternity as he watched Emma's silhouette through the bus windows. The bus stopped in Brixton, and Emma stepped off, still carrying those shopping bags. James parked across the street and watched her walk toward a run-down building with faded lettering on the front. His pulse quickened. This was it. The moment he'd catch her in whatever scheme she was running. Emma pushed through glass doors beneath a sign that read, Hope Community Centre. James frowned. A community centre. He crept closer, staying in the shadows. Through the large windows, he could see Emma setting down her bags and embracing an elderly woman. Then she moved to the front of a room filled with about 20 older adults, all holding notebooks and pencils. "Good evening, everyone?" Emma's voice carried through the thin walls. "Tonight we're going to practice ordering food at restaurants." James blinked. She was teaching. For the next hour, he watched Emma patiently help elderly immigrants practice English phrases. She smiled more in those 60 minutes than he'd seen in 8 months of working for him. When a man struggled with pronunciation, she knelt beside his chair and gently corrected him. When a woman looked frustrated, Emma squeezed her shoulder and encouraged her in Spanish. After class, Emma unpacked her shopping bags, groceries, but not for herself. Sandwich supplies, fruit, crackers. She made plates of food for her students, chatting with them as they ate. James stumbled backward, his world tilting. The £500 wire transfer, the early departures, the phone call about needing more money. It all made sense now, but not the way he'd expected. He drove home in a daze. Emma's joyful face burned into his memory. In his office, he researched the Hope Community Centre online, a non-profit serving London's immigrant community. English classes, legal aid, job training, childcare, all run on donations and volunteers. The centre's website showed photos of Emma teaching, Emma organising food drives, Emma reading to children. In every picture, she glowed with purpose. James found the centre's financial reports. They were struggling, operating month to month on small donations. The building needed repairs. Programs were being cut. He thought about Emma working 3 jobs: his house, a cleaning service in central London, and weekend shifts at a grocery store, all so she could afford to volunteer here every night, feeding people from her own pocket. His phone rang. David again. "Find anything interesting in your spy mission?" James rubbed his face. "I'm an idiot. She's not stealing from me. She's good." David. "Actually good. The money she sends home. It's for her mother's medical bills. The early departures. She volunteers at an immigrant centre every night. The expensive jewellery she was looking at. Probably dreaming, like everyone else." Silence on the other end. Then David's gentle voice. "When's the last time you met someone genuinely good? I don't think I ever have." The next morning, James found himself timing his coffee break to coincide with Emma's arrival. She seemed surprised to see him in the kitchen. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington. I'll get out of your way." "Actually, could you join me? I'd like to hear about your evening classes." Emma froze, a dish towel in her hands. "My what?" "Your volunteer work. Teaching English." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." "Emma." James set down his mug. "I followed you last night." She sank into a chair, looking defeated. "Are you going to fire me?" "Fire you? Why would I fire you?" "Because I lied about working late. Because I used my lunch break to buy food for the centre instead of eating. Because I've been distracted thinking about my students when I should be focused on your house." James stared at this woman who thought compassion was a firing offence. "Tell me about them. Your students." Emma looked up cautiously. "They're mostly elderly. Some have been here for decades, but never learned English properly. Maria is 73 and wants to talk to her doctor without her granddaughter translating. Carlos worked construction for 40 years, but can't read safety signs. They're proud people who just need a chance." As Emma talked, her face transformed. The quiet, careful housekeeper disappeared, replaced by someone passionate and alive. "The centre might close," she continued. "We can barely afford rent. I try to help with supplies when I can, but—" She gestured helplessly. That afternoon, James made an anonymous donation to the Hope Community Centre. £50,000, enough to keep them running for months. He used a shell company and fake name, ensuring it couldn't be traced back to him. "Someone donated £50,000! Emma burst into the kitchen the next morning, her eyes bright with excitement. "Can you believe it? The centre is saved." James looked up from his coffee, hiding his smile. "That's wonderful news. Any idea who?" "Anonymous. They just said they believed in our mission." Emma practically bounced as she unpacked her cleaning supplies. "We can fix the heater, buy new textbooks, maybe even start a computer class." Maria cried when I told her. Watching Emma's joy, James felt something warm unfold in his chest. When was the last time he'd made someone this happy? Over the following weeks, James found himself inventing reasons to be home during Emma's work hours. He'd emerge from his office needing coffee, just as she was dusting the living room. He'd remember urgent emails to send from the kitchen while she prepared his lunch. Their conversations grew longer and more personal. Emma told him about her thesis on economic inequality, her dreams of becoming a social worker, her homesickness for Honduras. James shared carefully selected stories about his business, his travels, his loneliness in the big house. "Don't you have family?" Emma asked one November afternoon as she arranged fresh flowers in his dining room. "My parents died when I was 22. Car accident." Emma's hands stilled. "I'm sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was. But it taught me to be self-reliant." James paused, then added quietly, "Maybe too self-reliant." "Family isn't just blood," Emma said gently. "At the centre, we're all family. Mrs. Chen brings soup for everyone. Mr. Rodriguez fixes things without being asked. We take care of each other." James envied that sense of belonging. His world consisted of business associates, employees, and people who wanted something from him. In December, James made another anonymous donation to the center, computers for the new lab Emma had mentioned. He watched through news reports as the community celebrated, Emma beaming as she cut the ribbon. "You seem different lately," David observed during their weekly meeting. "Happier." "Do I?" "You're smiling more, and you haven't run a background check on anyone in weeks." James deflected with business talk, but David was right. The constant suspicion that had plagued him for years felt less urgent. Emma's presence in his house brought warmth he hadn't realized he'd been missing. One January morning, James found Emma at his kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and papers. "Sorry, Mr. Harrington. I came early to make up time. I have a thesis meeting later." "What's your thesis about?" Emma's face lit up. "Barriers to social mobility in immigrant communities. I'm researching how language access, job training, and community support can break cycles of poverty." James sat down across from her, genuinely interested. "What have you found?" For the next hour, Emma explained her research with passion and intelligence that impressed him. She talked about systemic inequalities, about families working multiple jobs but still struggling, about the dignity of people who just needed opportunity. "Most people don't see it," she said. "They see someone cleaning their house or working in a restaurant and assume that's all they're capable of. But Carlos, he was an engineer in El Salvador. Isabella ran her own bakery. They're brilliant people reduced to survival jobs because their credentials don't transfer." James felt a stab of guilt, remembering his own assumptions about Emma. "I want to change that," she continued. "Create programs that recognize people's skills, help them build on what they already know instead of starting from zero." "That's incredible work, Emma." She blushed. "It's just research. Probably won't change anything." "Don't say that. You're already changing things at the center." Their eyes met across the table, and James felt something shift between them. Emma looked away first, gathering her papers. "I should get to work." That afternoon, James made a decision. "Emma, I'd like to offer you a full-time position, better salary, health benefits, paid vacation. You'd basically manage the household, coordinate with other staff, handle my schedule, that sort of thing." Emma stared at him. "That's very generous, but I don't understand. You barely trust me to dust your books." "I trust you," James said, and realized he meant it. "You're intelligent, responsible, and you care about doing things right. The salary would be enough to help your mother and pay for school." Emma bit her lip. "Can I think about it?" "Of course." But James could see the conflict in her eyes. More money meant security for her family, but it also meant less time for the center, less time for her studies, less time for the work that made her come alive. A week later, Emma found him in his office. "I've decided about the job offer." James looked up from his computer, heart racing. "I'm grateful, Mr. Harrington. Really. But I can't accept." "Why not?" Emma took a deep breath. "Because I'd be living someone else's dream instead of my own. The center needs me. My studies matter to me. And honestly," she met his eyes, "I've fallen in love with someone impossible, and taking this job would make me feel like I'm betraying that feeling." James felt the world tilt. Someone impossible. Someone who represents everything I want to do with my life. Someone who makes me want to be better, do more, help people. But our worlds are too different. It could never work. James's heart hammered. Emma, I should go, she said quickly. This is too personal. I'm sorry. As Emma hurried out, James stared after her, stunned. She was in love with someone else, someone who inspired her, someone who shared her values, someone who wasn't him. For the first time since his parents died, James felt his heart truly break. James spent the weekend in his office, staring at spreadsheets but seeing nothing. Emma loved someone else, someone impossible who inspired her to help people. Probably another volunteer at the centre, someone young, idealistic, someone who understood her world. Monday morning. Emma arrived as usual, but the easy warmth between them was gone. James kept their interactions brief and professional. Good morning, he said, without looking up from his newspaper. Good morning, Mr. Harrington? Her voice was careful, distant. The week crawled by in painful politeness. James buried himself in work, taking calls in his office, eating lunch at his desk. Emma cleaned around him like a ghost, efficient and invisible. Friday afternoon. She knocked on his office door. Mr. Harrington, I need to give you my notice. James looked up, his stomach dropping. Your notice? 2 weeks. I'm sorry for the short notice, but I need to focus on finishing my thesis. I've been accepted into a graduate program for social work, and I start my practicum soon. I see. James kept his voice level. Congratulations. That's quite an achievement. Thank you. Emma fidgeted with her cleaning supplies. I'll make sure everything is perfect before I go. I can help train my replacement if you'd like. That won't be necessary. The silence stretched between them. Emma nodded and turned to leave. Emma. She paused at the door. I'm proud of you. What you're doing, it matters. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. That means more than you know. The next 2 weeks were torture. James found himself memorizing Emma's routines. Knowing each day brought him closer to losing her completely. He helped her prepare for job interviews, writing glowing recommendation letters that felt like love letters he'd never send. The London Community Services Office called. He told her Wednesday of her final week. They want to schedule a second interview. Emma's face brightened. Really? That's my dream job. Working directly with immigrant families, helping them navigate services. You'll be perfect for it. James meant it, even as his heart broke a little more. Thursday evening. Emma stayed late to finish organizing his files. James brought her coffee and found her crying quietly at his kitchen table. What's wrong? She wiped her eyes quickly. Nothing. Just tired. Emma? It's stupid, she said. I'm leaving to pursue my dreams, which is what I wanted. But I'm going to miss this, our talks, feeling like someone cares about my work. James sat down across from her. Someone does care. Someone always will. Their eyes met, and for a moment, James thought about telling her everything, about following her that night, about the donations, about how she'd changed his entire worldview, about how he'd fallen in love with her kindness, her passion, her brilliant mind. Instead, he said, the person you mentioned, the impossible one, have you told him how you feel? Emma shook her head. What's the point? We're from different worlds. He'd never see me as anything more than… She gestured helplessly. Than what? Than what I am. Someone who cleans houses and comes from nothing. Emma, you're not nothing. You're extraordinary. She smiled sadly. You're kind to say that? Friday arrived too soon. Emma finished her final tasks and packed her supplies. James had prepared an envelope with her final paycheck and a substantial bonus, enough to cover her mother's medical expenses for a year. This is too much, Emma said, staring at the check. You've been invaluable to me. Consider it a graduation gift. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep in touch. Let me know how you're doing. Of course. They stood in his entryway, neither wanting to say goodbye. Finally, Emma stepped forward and hugged him briefly. Thank you for everything. Mr. Harrington, you've been more than an employer. You've been a friend. Take care of yourself. Emma? After she left, James walked through his house. Everything was spotless, perfectly organized, and completely empty. He'd returned to his fortress, but now the walls felt like a prison. Over the next few months, James fell back into old patterns. He hired a new housekeeper, an efficient woman named Janet, who did excellent work and never lingered for conversation. He threw himself into business, closing deals and making money that felt meaningless. But he couldn't stop thinking about Emma. He continued his anonymous donations to the Hope Community Center, watching their programs expand. He researched the London Community Services Office and felt pride when he learned Emma had been hired as a social worker specializing in immigrant family services. Through David's discreet inquiries, he learned she'd completed her thesis with honors and was excelling in her new role. She'd moved to a better apartment and was able to bring her mother to London for an extended visit. She's doing well, David reported over lunch. By all accounts, she loves her new job. Good, James said. That's what she wanted. What about what you want? James pushed food around his plate. It doesn't matter what I want. She's not married, you know. Still single. David? I'm just saying. Maybe the impossible isn't as impossible as you think. But James knew better. Emma had found her path, surrounded by people who shared her passion for justice and service. She didn't need a paranoid millionaire disrupting her new life. Still, when the invitation arrived for the Hope Community Center's annual fundraising gala, James found himself staring at it for a long time. Emma would be there. The invitation mentioned she'd be receiving an award for her volunteer service. Against his better judgment, James RSVP'd yes. He told himself he just wanted to see her success, to witness her happiness from afar. But as the date approached, James realized he was hoping for something more. A chance to see if the connection they'd shared had been real, or just his imagination. James stood in his walk-in closet, staring at rows of expensive suits. The fundraising gala was tonight, and he'd changed his mind about attending at least 6 times in the past week. You're overthinking this, David said from the doorway. It's a charity event. You go, you write a check, you leave. What if she thinks I'm stalking her? What if she's happy to see you? James pulled out a navy suit. She's moved on, David. New job, new life. I'm ancient history. You won't know unless you go. Across town, Emma stood in her small apartment bathroom, applying lipstick with shaking hands. The community centre's gala felt surreal. Months ago, she was volunteering in the evenings after cleaning houses. Tonight, she was receiving an award for her service. "You look beautiful, mija," her mother said from the doorway. Isabella Morales had arrived from Honduras recently, finally healthy enough to travel after her surgery. "I'm nervous, Mama." "Why?" "You've earned this recognition." Emma couldn't explain that she kept hoping James would somehow be there. Ridiculous, of course. Why would a tech mogul attend an immigrant community centre's fundraiser? "Tell me again about this man you worked for," her mother said, settling on Emma's bed. "Mama, I've told you 100 times. Humour an old woman. You always smiled when you talked about him." Emma sighed. "He was kind. Lonely, I think. We talked about my work, my dreams. He made me feel like what I was doing mattered." "And you loved him?" Emma met her mother's knowing eyes in the mirror. "It doesn't matter. We were from different worlds. Love doesn't care about worlds. Mija." The Hope Community Centre had been transformed. String lights hung from the ceiling. Tables draped in white linens filled the main room, and a small stage was set up for the evening's programme. Emma arrived early to help with last-minute preparations. "There's our guest of honour," called Maria, the elderly woman from Emma's first English class. At 73, she now volunteered as a translator for newer immigrants. "I can't believe they're giving me an award," Emma said, adjusting a centerpiece. "You saved this place," said Carlos, the former engineer, who now taught basic computer skills. "That anonymous donation came right after you started working here full-time as a volunteer. Coincidence? I think not." Emma had wondered about the timing herself. The first donation had come right after she'd mentioned the centre might close. The second had appeared days after she'd talked about needing computers. But anonymous donors were common for non-profits. It was just good timing. Guests began arriving at 6. Emma mingled, catching up with former students and their families. The room filled with the warm chatter of multiple languages, children running between tables, and the laughter of people celebrating their community. At 7:30, Emma was greeting a family near the entrance when she saw him. James stood in the doorway, scanning the room. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and looked as elegant and out of place as she'd expected. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Emma's breath caught. He was here. Actually here. James felt his heart slam against his ribs as Emma stared at him from across the room. She looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair pinned up, a genuine smile lighting her face as she talked with families around her. This was her world, warm, inclusive, full of purpose. He didn't belong here, but he couldn't make himself leave. "Mr. Harrington." James turned to find an elderly man approaching with a warm smile. "Carlos Mendez. Emma has told us so much about you." "She has?" "Of course. You were very kind to her when she worked for you. She spoke of you often." Before James could respond, the evening's program began. Emma was called to the stage to receive the Volunteer of the Year award. As she accepted the small crystal plaque, James felt pride swell in his chest. "This community saved me as much as I've tried to serve it," Emma said into the microphone. "When I first came to this country, I felt invisible. Here, I learned that everyone has value. Everyone has something to contribute. We also have an anonymous donor to thank. Someone whose generosity has allowed us to expand our programs and serve more families. Whoever you are, you've shown us that kindness comes from unexpected places, and sometimes angels appear when we need them most. James's hands clenched in his lap. She still didn't know. After the program, James stayed in his corner, watching Emma laugh with families, hug former students, and glow with the confidence of someone who'd found her calling. Several times, she glanced in his direction, but she was always pulled away by well-wishers. Finally, as the evening wound down, Emma approached him. "Mr. Harrington, I can't believe you're here. Congratulations on your award. You deserve the recognition." "Thank you." Emma fidgeted with her plaque. "This is unexpected. I didn't think charity galas were your thing." "They're not, usually, but this cause seemed worth supporting." Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face brightened. "Mama, how was your doctor appointment?" She switched to Spanish, talking rapidly while James waited. After a few minutes, she hung up, beaming. "Good news?" he asked. "The best. My mother's cancer is officially in remission. She's been living with me since her surgery, and today the doctor said she's completely healthy." Emma's eyes filled with happy tears. "I've been so worried. And now—" "That's wonderful. Emma, you must be relieved." "I am, and grateful. An anonymous benefactor helped pay for her treatment. I've been trying to find them to thank them properly. Without that help, I don't know what would have happened." James felt his throat tighten. She was thanking him without knowing it, and he'd never felt more like a coward. "Emma," he began, then stopped. How could he explain without sounding like he'd been manipulating her life from the shadows? "What is it?" James looked into her warm brown eyes and made a decision that would change everything. "There's something I need to tell you," James said, his voice barely audible over the remaining chatter in the community centre. "About the anonymous donor." Emma tilted her head, confused. "What about them?" James took a deep breath. "It was me. Both donations, to the centre and for your mother's medical bills." Emma stared at him, the crystal plaque trembling in her hands. "What?" "The £50,000 to save the centre, the money for your mother's surgery, the computers for the lab, all of it." "But how did you even know about—" Emma's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You followed me." James nodded, shame flooding his face. "That night you left early? I thought you were stealing from me. I followed you here and saw you teaching your class. I realized how wrong I'd been about everything." Emma sank into a nearby chair, processing. "You've been watching my life, manipulating it." "No, Emma, that's not— Isn't it?" Her voice rose, causing a few remaining guests to glance over. "You decided what I needed, what my family needed, what this place needed, without asking, without telling me." James knelt beside her chair. "You're right. I should have told you. But at first, I was ashamed of why I followed you. Then later, I was afraid you'd refuse the help if you knew it came from me." "Of course I would have refused." Emma stood abruptly. "Do you have any idea how it feels to learn that your independence, your family's health, your community's survival All of it was just some rich man's charity project? It wasn't charity, James said desperately. Emma, watching you that night, seeing how you lived, how you gave everything to help others, it changed me. For the first time in my life, I understood what real wealth looked like. Emma paced away from him, then back. And what was I to you? Some noble, poor person who made you feel good about yourself? You were the first person I trusted in 15 years, James said quietly. You were kindness and intelligence, and everything good I thought had been stripped out of the world. You were… What? James stood, meeting her eyes. You were the person I fell in love with. Emma's anger faltered. Don't. I know you love someone else. Someone impossible who inspires you to do good work. I know I'm not that person. But I need you to know that helping you, helping this place, it wasn't about control or charity. It was about love. Emma stared at him, tears forming in her eyes. You really don't understand, do you? Understand what? James. Her voice was gentle now. You are that person, the impossible one I told you about. James felt the world shift. What? Did you think I was talking about someone else? You were the only man in my life, the only one who listened to my dreams, who made me feel like my work mattered. But I convinced myself it was hopeless because you were my employer, because you were wealthy, because I was just the help. James stepped closer. Emma. I spent months falling in love with someone I thought could never love me back. And all this time, you were already loving me in the only way you knew how. They stood facing each other in the nearly empty community centre. Years of misunderstanding finally dissolving. I followed you because I was paranoid and suspicious, James said. But I fell in love with you because you showed me what it means to live with purpose. I thought you saw me as just another employee who might betray you. I saw you as everything I'd lost faith in. Goodness. Honesty. Someone who cared more about others than herself. Emma reached up and touched his face. We're both idiots. James laughed, the sound rusty from months of unhappiness. Completely. So what do we do now? James took her hands in his. I want to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Emma nodded. I don't just want to date you. Emma, I want to build a life with you, a real partnership. I want to use everything I have, my money, my connections, my resources, to support the work you do, not as charity, but as equals working toward the same goals. Emma's eyes widened. James, I've learned that money is just a tool. It only matters when it's used to help people. You've shown me how to use it right. I want you to teach me more. I want to learn from you, work beside you, love you while we make the world a little better. Emma smiled through her tears. You want to be my partner in crime fighting poverty and injustice. I want to be your partner in everything. Emma stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, James rested his forehead against hers. There's one more thing, Emma said. My mother wants to meet you. James grinned. Should I be nervous? Terrified. She's already decided you're too skinny and need feeding. As they walked out of the community centre, hand in hand, James looked back at the photos on the walls. Immigrants learning English, families celebrating graduations, children playing in the after-school program. This place had brought them together, and now it would be part of their shared future. "Ready to change the world, Mr. Harrington?" Emma asked. "With you? I'm ready for anything." Outside, London's evening lights sparkled like promises, and for the first time in years, James felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Their love deepened in the months that followed, blossoming into a partnership that transcended their differences. Emma continued her work at the London Community Services Office, where she thrived as a social worker, helping immigrant families navigate their new lives with dignity. James, inspired by her passion, redirected his resources to support the Hope Community Centre, no longer as an anonymous donor, but as an active partner. Together, they launched the Thompson-Harrington Foundation, a beacon of hope focused on education, job training, and community development across Greater London. Their wedding was held at the heart of the Hope Community Centre, transformed with white roses and baby's breath, string lights creating a canopy of stars above the main hall. Emma stood at the back of the room in her grandmother's wedding dress, her heart full as she watched the space that had changed her life become the setting for their new beginning. "You ready, Mija?" Her mother, Isabella Morales, asked, adjusting Emma's veil. Isabella had settled in London, her health restored thanks to the anonymous donation James had made, and her English had improved dramatically with his patient tutoring. "More than ready, Mama," Emma replied, smiling. Isabella had taken one look at James during their first meeting, declared him too skinny and too serious, and set about fixing both with her cooking and warmth. "He's a good man," she whispered as the music began. "Different from what I expected, but good." Emma remembered James's first dinner at her apartment, arriving with flowers and nervousness, only to be seated at her tiny kitchen table for 2 hours of gentle interrogation in rapid-fire Spanish. By the end of the evening, Isabella was teaching him to make pupusas while sharing embarrassing stories of Emma's childhood. The wedding march began, and Emma walked down a makeshift aisle between folding chairs filled with an eclectic mix of guests. James's business associates sat beside her former English students. Tech executives chatted with community organisers. Carlos, now the centre's IT director thanks to a program Emma and James had launched, dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. At the front of the room, James waited in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his face glowing with happiness. Beside him stood David Chen, who had become not just James's best man, but Emma's good friend, joining their weekly dinners and community events. "Dearly beloved," began Father Martinez, the priest who had married half the couples in the neighbourhood. "We gather today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other not just love, but purpose." Emma and James had written their own vows. James spoke first, his voice clear and steady. "Emma, you taught me that wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the lives we touch. You showed me that trust isn't weakness, but strength. You proved that love doesn't divide us by our differences, but multiplies our ability to do good. I promise to be your partner in all things, in love, in life, and in the work of making this world more just and kind." Emma's voice was unwavering as she replied, "James, you taught me that assumptions can blind us to unexpected blessings. You showed me that vulnerability isn't foolishness, but courage. You proved that two people from different worlds can build a new world together. I promise to be your partner in all things, in dreams realized, in challenges faced, and in the joy of serving something greater than ourselves. When Father Martinez pronounced them husband and wife, the entire community center erupted in cheers. Maria threw rice despite the no rice sign, and the children from the after-school program rushed forward with homemade congratulations cards. During the reception, Emma and James moved through the crowd together, thanking guests and soaking in the celebration. The dance floor filled with couples, David dancing with Isabella, who had appointed herself his Spanish tutor, Carlos twirling his granddaughter, Maria and her husband of 50 years moving with practiced grace. As they swayed to their first dance, Emma teased. "Remember when you thought I was stealing from you?" James countered. "Remember when you thought I could never see you as anything more than the help?" They laughed, spinning slowly as their community celebrated around them. Their honeymoon took them to Honduras, where James met Emma's extended family, who welcomed him with care packages and hand-knitted sweaters. They returned to London with renewed purpose, diving into their shared mission. The Thompson-Harrington Foundation grew, its impact rippling across the city. The Hope Community Centre, once a struggling outpost, became a vibrant hub, its faded facade now alive with murals painted by local youth. New programs flourished: vocational training, mental health support, legal aid, and a garden where families gathered to heal and connect. Emma, now a celebrated advocate, stood at the centre's annual gala, her eyes scanning a room filled with familiar faces. Maria, now a community health liaison, Carlos, leading tech workshops for seniors, and Isabella, who had opened a Honduran cafe next door, its profits funding scholarships for young immigrants. James stood beside her, no longer the guarded millionaire, but a humble partner whose wealth had found meaning in service. "Tonight," Emma began, her voice warm and steady, "we celebrate not just what we've built, but who we've become. This centre taught me that every person carries a story, a dream, a spark of potential. Our work isn't about giving handouts. It's about creating spaces where those sparks can ignite, where strangers become family, and where hope becomes action." She glanced at James, whose quiet smile mirrored her own. "I once felt invisible in this city, but here, with all of you, I learned that everyone has value. Together, we've shown that kindness can come from unexpected places, and that love, when shared, builds a world where everyone belongs." James took her hand, stepping forward. "Emma taught me that true wealth lies in connection, not control. This community showed me that trust is built through shared purpose. Together, we've created something enduring, not a monument to our names, but a legacy of lives changed, voices heard, and dreams realized." The room erupted in applause, but Emma and James's eyes were drawn to a group of children from the after-school program, who rushed onto the stage with a handmade banner, "Hope grows where love builds." Among them was Sophia, a recent arrival from Honduras, who had just won a citywide essay contest about her dream to become a doctor. Emma knelt beside her, whispering words of encouragement, while James handed her a scholarship certificate from the foundation. Later, they walked through the centre's new garden, the air filled with the scent of jasmine and the soft chatter of families. Isabella joined them, her cafe apron dusted with flour, and handed them each a warm pupusa. "You two have done good," she said, her eyes twinkling. "But don't forget to rest. The world will still need saving tomorrow." Emma laughed, leaning into James. "We'll rest when you stop feeding half of Brixton." "Mama." As they stood together, watching the garden fill with laughter and light, they reflected on their journey. What began with suspicion had blossomed into a movement of compassion. Their love had transformed not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. The Hope Community Centre was no longer just a place. It was a testament to the power of human connection, where every individual, no matter their background, could find a home, a purpose, and a chance to shine. Through the window, London's skyline glowed under a starlit sky, a reminder of the city that had brought them together. But the true light came from the people around them, their stories, their resilience, their shared dreams. Emma squeezed James's hand, her heart full. "This is what matters?" she whispered. "Not what we have, but what we give." James nodded, pulling her close. "And who we give it with." Together, they stepped back into the garden, ready to continue their work, not as saviours, but as equals among a community that had taught them the deepest truth, that love, when shared, builds a world where everyone belongs. Some love stories begin with grand gestures or chance encounters. This one began with a millionaire following his maid after work, only to discover that the greatest treasure had been beside him all along, not hidden, but simply waiting for him to open his heart enough to see it.